Hi, Dr. Claire. Welcome to Grow Your Wealth. How are you today?
Thank you so much for having me. I am doing well. Thank you. What about you?
Oh, I am good because I get to talk to you today. I know we're going to cover so much, and I'm so excited to be here. I know everyone's in for a treat. I love your philosophy, Dr. Claire, that work shouldn't hurt. So powerful. It says so much without saying a lot. What's the story behind this? Work shouldn't hurt.
Oh, it's a deep story. It's a long story, but I'll make it short. So first, I want to say again, thank you so much for having me on here. And I really appreciate even the thoughtfulness of starting with this question and framing it this way. When I say work shouldn't hurt, I am not saying that it should never be demanding, it should never be challenging, it should never be difficult, complex, because growth requires us to go through some challenges and uncomfortable seasons, right? Just because it's uncomfortable doesn't mean that it's harmful. Accountability is uncomfortable, being asked to go beyond your typical limits or comfort zone and connect with people and engage systems that you typically would not do is uncomfortable. But what I'm saying is work should never be dehumanizing, demoralizing, and depressing. And that is one of the biggest challenges that we often have. And I don't know another way of saying it shouldn't hurt, unless I always tell people, unless you work, for example, for WWE, then maybe that work should hurt because you're jumping off of things. But ultimately, I think that, when I'm talking about this, I want people to understand that this is both from my professional experience and my lived experience. I'm a trained mental health practitioner. I'm a leadership strategist. I talk to organizations about the intersection of mental health and well-being and culture and all of those things. And it came from my 20 years in healthcare, in behavioral health, in government, in policy, in all the different areas that I worked in. And ultimately, I experienced so much harm in the workplace. This is also deeply personal. I left after years of working in toxic workplace culture, because it literally almost killed me. And I remember, my doctor saying to me, it's your job or your life. That's literally the decision that was put before me. I was sick all the time. I was having illnesses, that did not make sense at all. When I mean don't make sense, do not make sense. And they could not find out what was happening. I'm in my 30s. They're like, this is not making sense. And what they said eventually was there's no medical reason for these except for the stress that you're going through at work and navigating society. This is going to kill you. And I found myself in the ER, literally wondering whether or not I was going to make it or not. That is why I say work shouldn't hurt. I'm also an academic. I read, I know the research, I know the statistics. I know that 76% of US workers say that they have a mental health condition, and 84% say their jobs contribute to at least one of those. I know that depression and anxiety are the leading causes of disability in the world, according to the World Health Organization. That's all related to work. Workplace and workplace culture is the largest public health threat that we do not discuss. And that's why I say work shouldn't hurt, because those are the things that led me to change the way I viewed work, especially for me as someone who carries intersecting identities, as an immigrant, as a woman, as somebody who presents Black, and all of the isms I've navigated in and outside of the workplace. It took a toll. And we call that weathering clinically, or we talk about the allostatic load. But that is what it costs. And you cannot lead effectively in a system that is dehumanizing you.
Oh my goodness. Absolutely. And I am so sorry to hear about your, what do they say? The body keeps score, right, Dr. Clear? Like all of this that's going on up here, that's going in the workplace, and it catches up with you. And that's a topic we could talk so much about here. I mean, we call it burnout, right? But burnout isn't just like, wow, I need to take a break and get back at it, right? The body keeps score, the mind keeps score. And it just reminds me so much of this saying that I've heard, that I'm sure you've heard so many times, that people don't leave jobs, they leave bad managers or bad leaders. In terms of responding to this as a leader, because you said workplace culture, and that's something that I think sometimes comes from the top down, right?
Absolutely.
So in that case, how does a leader show up in terms of their impact on their team, their employees? I mean, we've all had a bad boss, right? And it's not just as easy as like leaving the job. I mean, particularly you, it sounds like you are doing a lot of like mission driven work and still falling apart, right?
Oh gosh, yeah. Oh goodness. I always tell people the only difference I think with mission driven and nonprofit is that you get paid a lot less to be abused. It's the same as corporate. You're just so.
Yes. I concur. I was in nonprofit for 9 years and I'm like, yeah.
I'm speaking to my people. You already get it. Yes.
Totally, completely get it. I mean, could you tell us a little bit about leadership and what role does it play in terms of some of these statistics that you were showing, like 84% of people that identify with some sort of mental health issue attribute things at work.
Yeah.
What's happening at work?
Well, we have harmful cultures at work. You mentioned about the top down, and it is top down. You're right. The best way I can sum it up before I fully get into this is leadership is not neutral. It never has been. Culture is not what organizations say they value. We have beautiful mission statements, and we both have been in nonprofits. So the mission statements are just amazing, right? Like they are just poetic and they are just making you feel as though you're wrapped up in the whirlwind of unicorns and fairy tales. But the reality of what you experience, that's really the culture. And culture is shaped, maintained, and sustained by leadership, what you tolerate. When I have the opportunity to partner with organizations, because I do workshops, I do keynotes, and small amount of short-term strategic consulting because I really care about this work, I ask people one question: what is the worst behavior you tolerate? Because that tells me everything I need to know about the culture of your organization. And is it the person that is problematic? 15 people have quit because of this person, but because this person is a revenue generator, you have allowed this person to stay in your organization. That happens so often. I remember a time in my career when I was working in healthcare, and I had a very senior leader executive screaming and yelling at me in a meeting. I mean, demeaning me. Told me I was ignorant, all of these things, all because I did not agree with this person's diagnosis. And I was young in the profession, and I understand this person has, they're a doctor at the time, and I wasn't, and all of these things. However, I was very clear at the time that this person did not like the patient. And as a result of that, they were trying to use their medical authority to give the patient a diagnosis that would strip the patient of their autonomy. And I didn't agree with it because you're not mentally unwell if you're a curmudgeon old man. And he was a curmudgeon old man, and I adored him. I personally feel clinically, and this is separate, if you are 95 years old, you have earned the right to cuss anybody out if you feel like it. He earned the right to cuss anybody out.
From a therapist, ladies and gentlemen, by the way, total permission.
you have gone through and he was also a Vietnam War vet, and wow. So there was different people, but I feel as though if you've gotten to a certain point in life and you're upset about something or somebody's taking your autonomy, and we were in the hospital. And so that person demeaned me and screamed at me. And when I went to HR director, I told them what happened. And they said, yeah, we know this is not the first time, but he is an attending. Nothing can be done about this. I was so early into my career, and you thought, oh, HR is supposed to help.
Yeah.
So I use that story to say that leadership is not neutral because it shapes more than productivity. It shapes trust, communication, innovation, your drive, your focus, your mental health, retention. The things that many organizations think are soft skills are the core foundational skills of their business. Because no matter what, we are in the business of people. Organizations are made up of organisms, us as human beings. We drive the business. If you do not care about your profits, that means you don't care about your people.
Oh my God. Say that again.
If you don't care about your profits, that means you don't care about your people. And the inverse is true. If you don't care about your people, then you don't care about your profits.
That's exactly what I was thinking, Dr. Claire, when you were just talking about that person that you worked with, right? The attending physician who tried to give this terrible diagnosis and nothing can be done about it. You're clearly not still there, right?
Yeah.
How many people, like you're going to lose your other high performers simply because how do you how do you continue to respect your workplace after something like that happens where it's just a matter of like, okay, I see the game we're playing here and this is not a place for me because I can't take you seriously. I can't
Mhm.
trust you in that case. And the cost that your previous place of employment must have endured to replace you and others like you because of one, we'll call it toxic person in the workplace.
But it's I want to go a little bit beyond the person.
Mm,
It is a system that is shaped by decisions that people make every day.
mm,
It is the culture, it is the heartbeat, it is the foundation of the organization because culture is not shaped by a mission statement. It is shaped by repeated behaviors and what
mm,
people experience. So when leadership is harmful, when it is avoidant, when it doesn't hold people accountability, when it's fear based, people spend more time trying to protect themselves than contributing fully. And yes, they can leave. And we know that research tells us that on average, it can take 1.5 to 2 times or more the salary of an employee to replace each person that leaves. And
mm.
so when I speak to an organization, if and a lot of organizations are resistant to this work, so let's just be honest there.
Yeah.
And I speak to an organization, they go, well, your fee is high. And I go, okay, I get that. How much money did you lose for the 10 people that have left in the last 6 months? Because realistically, my fee is 5% of that money that you lost over six
Mm,
months. The hospital system or the healthcare system, because I always call it our hospital system because it's always connected to a hospital at some point,
mm,
that I left, I was very early in my career, but I remember before I left, because I still wasn't sure, I was figuring out how I was approaching the world and I didn't know the words. I just knew I had these feelings. I didn't know what the words were at that time. But I remember a supervisor saying to me that I had saved the system almost $1 million. There was a client that I was afraid of, very afraid of, and many people were violent, aggressive. Nobody knew where this person was from. And I had to challenge myself. I identify as Christian, I'm a woman of faith, and definitely I leaned into my faith at that time. But I started connecting to this client who was floridly psychotic through scriptures and eventually got his real name because he was under a pseudonym the whole time. We didn't know. Almost a year in the facility. I got his name, found out the name of his mother, called. He'd been missing for over a year because when we found him, he had been naked running through traffic and you have been in New York. So this person was in a whole other borough and ended up in Brooklyn from the Bronx.
oh, Lord.
Exactly. You know how long, that's a 2-hour train ride.
Yeah.
However, they escaped a hospital. And because of pushing myself past my limits, past my bias, because people would say, oh, this person's speaking gibberish, this person's this person's that. Uh, Again, scary. I remember when I found out the information, once we found out where this person was from, who they were, the hospital system was able to bill. And that was almost $1 million because at that time, the person had been there for almost a year. That is how much. So when I think about the impact, I go, you lost someone that got you back over $1 million in revenue.
Mm,
And that's what we're doing every day in our organizations. We look at the high earner, the person that may bring in $10 million, and you're like, we can't touch them. But you've lost the 15 people that collectively bring in 50
mm,
because you don't value the contributions that they're making along the way. And then as they are demoralized, as they're dehumanized, their input and productivity is lowered. You increase risk, particularly in the systems that I'm in. This is literally life and death. I will never be an accomplice to harming someone intentionally or unintentionally. Leadership is absolutely a matter of life and death, particularly in a lot of the systems that we're touching, healthcare and social impact. We have a moral and ethical and human obligation to lead and to lead well. And that's why I say that leadership is not neutral.
Yeah. I mean, what you're saying too, I resonate not just as a business owner, but I think as a human being too. I know in leadership a lot, empathy gets a bad rap, right? Like it's all about the bottom line. Heck, it's all about the top line. And empathy comes across as being more soft, as you said, like very secondary, like business first, people second, third. And obviously, as you just mentioned, if you don't care about your people, you don't care about your profits and vice versa, which I love. But you actually have talked about empathy not being the opposite of
Mhm.
accountability, which most leaders are there to help guide their team, but also hold them accountable. Could you unpack that for us? What does that look like in practice?
Yes. So, and I really do like this question a lot because empathy has been misunderstood and dismissed because it becomes easier if we disconnect ourselves from our humanity so that we can dehumanize someone else. People often associate empathy with weakness and avoidance and permissiveness, and you can do whatever you want, or we're lowering the standard. And that is not empathy at all. Empathy is the ability to recognize our own humanity first
Mm-hmm.
and the humanity of other people within the social, the political, the context, power, impact of their lived experience, our own lived experience, while still maintaining accountability and expectations and being transparent about that. So, an empathetic leader, and I always say empathy is my superpower and connection is my gift. Empathy is asking, how is this landing for this person? How is it landing for me? What is this person carrying? What assumptions am I making about this person because of conscious and unconscious bias beliefs? Because of the culture, because of my comfort or my discomfort? What are the conditions that I am creating or that are being created that may render this person showing up this way or me showing up the way I'm showing up? It always requires us to hold what's happening for us and others. We cannot lead others effectively if we can't lead ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so the thing is that as much times as people think empathy is this soft skill, I always tell people, ironically, empathy is actually the thing that improves accountability and performance because people are more likely to be honest with you about what's going on and to engage and collaborate and to risk that throwing out that idea that could be your viral idea, could be your top seller because they're able to take ownership in environments where they feel respected and valued. So empathy is not the absence of accountability. It's the presence of humanity.
I love that. And in addition to empathy being a great example of a positive leadership behavior, can you give us any other examples too, Dr. Claire, of leadership behaviors that maybe seem unintentional, though, that are actually creating harm in the workplace?
Yeah. I'm like, how much time do we have?
Maybe give us one example.
No problem. So I always tell people that a toxic workplace culture, toxic leadership is not what we assume. The yelling, the screaming, the obvious discrimination, and the abuse, right? It's normalizing dehumanization and not being transparent. I think one of the biggest toxic workplace culture and leadership traits is not being transparent with people.
Mm.
Honesty and trust go hand in hand. That transparency is the foundation of that. And when you have trust, you can literally have people operate their best and do their best. Without trust, think of it when we take it out of the, work relationship, everything is a ship, according a friendship, a partnership, whatever ship you're on, it's a ship. And ships there's certain conditions you need to be able to float, right? And to go forth. Just as we need good weather, or we might need the water conditions to be safe enough for this ship to float or to move, it's the same thing in the work ship, right? If I don't have trust and I can't know that what you're saying is true and that you're going to be honest with me and not last minute, because the lack of transparency also creates unnecessary urgency and chaos. And nobody operates well in that. We don't. No matter how many times we try to tell people, I thrive on high pressure. No, you don't. That's an adrenaline rush. And eventually that's going to lead to cortisol flooding your body. And cortisol is not good for any of us because it causes us to break down. It's not. And so I would say that for me, that is a big one. The lack of transparency. For example, if there's layoffs coming, people may feel it, may hear the whispers. An organization that works to get ahead of it and say, look, we have missed our, second quarter projections. As we prepare for budgeting and all of these uncertainties that's happening, we may have layoffs. We do not have all of the information now, but we are going to do our best to ensure that we communicate when we know, and we're going to do our best to ensure that you are given ample notice or time frame. We want you to know that this is not performance based. It is, and we are doing everything we can to stop this, but we may not be able to. And this is where we may have some more information and we'll let you know. That is transparency. I can't tell you how many organizations I've been in where I've sat in the room, they know that this is happening and they don't say anything. I've sat with leaders who have the flexibility before COVID to work from home and work remotely. And because they're having a family crisis and they're just gone. But the worker who is also having a family crisis did not have that ability. Mm. That lack of transparency, that lack of trust leads to people leaving. Mm-hmm. I would say two more examples because I think it's really important. Inconsistency. And the thing I mentioned to you before about protecting those who we deem to be high performers or high earners, because it's not always about the overt cruelty. It's a repeated failure to recognize the cumulative impact of leadership behaviors and what they do to people over time. That creates that toxic culture and the lack of trust.
Thank you for sharing that. And I 100% agree with you about the transparency. I have definitely, gone through some turbulent times in my own business over the last 10 years. And that is something that I'm just like it comes more naturally for me to be more open. But I also think, to your point, I love how you phrased what you just phrased about the layoffs very calmly, very openly, but also reassuredly as well. I think that I've also been around leaders that some people have called transparent, and they don't instill calm and empathy in what they call in their communication, right? Because so much of this, in addition to like relationships, friendships, all of it centers around communication. I think a lot of it. And sometimes I have this funny thought in my head, like where it's like over communication sometimes without the skill of communication in and of itself can create also chaos as well too. Yes. Maybe that's me overthinking it, but
no, you are right. You're right.
Yeah. So I know also, and I don't speak for myself here, Dr. Claire, know others, workplaces, some of them do try hard. And I know, to your point, what you said earlier, that you're like, some places are just allergic to improving their company culture. They don't care. People are just so privileged to work there, and it's a revolving door, and somehow they still manage to be profitable for now. That being said, some workplaces do try. I want to get your thoughts on if they're trying the so-called right way. So what I'm thinking about, you mentioned COVID too, where work from home was obviously a really big deal for a lot of people, particularly for like young parents. It was really helpful to be able to have that. And then, COVID is done and the return to work happens, and these workers are having to make really difficult decisions. Just as one example, being, flexible in terms of where you work, I think can be a helpful part of the culture. But then there's also things like self-care, right? Like I remember once I was working at a nonprofit, I busted my ass, excuse my language, on a work project that was, for some of the top like retailers in the country. And I think I got like $100 Bliss Spa gift card as a thank you. They're like, here, you deserve this. And I'm like, I deserve a promotion, not a gift card. So, part of it, it's like, okay, I appreciate the gesture, but I know that you've even said that like self-care cannot fix a broken system. It cannot fix a culture of not rewarding your high performers and so forth. That being said, what's got to shift? Let's talk about solutions, right? Like in addition to like being more transparent, like, more even tactically speaking, like, how can we as leaders or company founders and so forth really help support our teams better, not just on the surface?
No, yeah, I think this is a great question. I'm going to add in a context because I think context matters. So what we're talking about is this even the example you gave of working really hard and getting the gift card. Yes, but when we talk about self-care, what's often connected to that is burnout. This very common word of burnout. And I am starting to have a adverse reaction to the word burnout. But organizations often treat burnout as an individual wellness and resilience issue instead of a leadership, culture, financial, reputational, and system problem.
Mm-hmm.
They offer the self-care initiatives or the little card and the meditation, the yoga apps, the pizza parties, the whatever half-day Fridays, whatever that is, while they ignore the excessive workload and the toxic workplace culture, the inequity in pay, the inequity in support resources, the harmful behaviors. Burnout is data.
Mm-hmm.
If we look at burnout as a data point, then we can understand that when we talk about how we lead better, we have to look at the data points that are showing us where there are gaps in the system and where the system is also working. It's not also always about looking for what's wrong. It's like looking for what's right, but always having to be, the word you used earlier, flexible. When you use the data, the information about COVID, the thing that came to my mind was it was women that were predominantly impacted by that, regardless of socioeconomic background, regardless of if they were a C-suite executive or an assistant. It was women that took the brunt of that. And so our systems are not designed to support the well-being of people. And when we think about how we lead differently, then we need to think about how our systems and what we support is actually structured, because you cannot you can't self-care your way out of dysfunction. Like, you just can't. Right. And so when I think about why this matters and how it connects to organizations, I want leaders to examine all of these factors: workload and staffing patterns and communication patterns and norms, flexibility. I want them to explore boundaries and equity. Who gets to say something without fearing the repercussions of that? I always tell people, people talk about brave spaces and and safe spaces. I don't believe in those things either, because these are subjective things. People should not have to recover from a workplace. If people have to recover from you and your leadership, we already know that this is horrible. This is not good. This idea that as leaders, we need to lean into curiosity more is absolutely where it is for me. When you said you got a gift card, my thing is, well, why didn't they ask you what you would have wanted? What would have been better? There's nothing wrong with having a conversation with you to say, hey, you've been doing amazing. You've been kicking ass. We don't have an opportunity to promote you right now, but what would be something that's helpful for you? Because that could be you saying, you know what? I would really welcome a few more vacation days because I'm tired now. That may have been it.
Yeah.
It may have been you said, I would love to be employee of the month or of the whatever it is and be recognized for that. Or actually, you just saying thank you privately is enough because I would be mortified if you publicize this. We need to ask people what they need. But many of the times organizations and leaders act, because organizations are leaders, act as though some of these things are so complicated, and it's not. An employee asking for 3 additional days is really not going to break your system. I promise you. It's not that complicated. We don't have any more time in our bank. Yes, you do. You can literally do it. It's not that hard. Not.
Yeah.
Those, for me, it's really about the curiosity. That is how we can be more effective as leaders. But it's also about examining our own selves, our biases. We carry biases, conscious and unconscious. And I think more of our biases are conscious than we like to admit. How are we showing up? Do we have a bias against this person because they are a parent? Are they a caregiver? Do we have an assumption about this person because they won't stay late at work, but you have no idea that this person is caregiving to their parent who has dementia, and they're trading off who's watching this person. And so I can't stay late because there will be no person to watch my loved one, because my sister and I trade off who's watching, because she works, 7 to 3 and I'm working 4 to 12. We don't ask, and you don't need to know someone's personal story to honor their humanity, but we have to get more curious. And the assumptions that we make about people are often the things we project, and that indicates the way that we give feedback, performance evaluations. There's so much research that talks about that. As women, there's no more research that needs to be done, that we're going to be evaluated based on vibes and feelings. I don't feel you smile enough. I don't feel you're not tangible. Hey, you are 15 minutes late to work every day. You need to improve your job. No, men tend to get those tangible things. We get things that we can't even grasp those things. Those are all things that make leadership more effective and make organizations much more effective and profitable. Because something you said they seem to be making all this money for now. And that's true. Many organizations function 40, 50 years in chaos and seem to be doing well. But the world is shifting. People's values are shifting, and they're not aligned with the current market and where the market trends are going. So for now, you're okay, but this is about legacy building.
Absolutely. And also building a sustainable business. I mean, something that you had mentioned too is like, that was such a brilliant notion. Like, just getting curious can go such a long way. Like, thank you for asking, right? Like, how many times do we get a question unexpectedly, especially from a boss or a leader where you were not expecting that? Like, wow, genuinely, thank you for asking. What I would have wanted had I responded with a little bit of extra vacation time. It's funny because whether or not you give it, they're going to get it, right? Because they're going to burn out or something's going to happen. I think I even saw a really illuminating stat on your website about that exact same thing in terms of loss of overall productivity, what that amounts to just in terms of economic impact. I mean,
oh, yeah.
We're backwards.
The U.S. companies, on the low estimate, lose about $300 billion a year. I want to say it again, $300 billion with a B dollars a year, due to unaddressed mental health and workplace culture needs. That because they drive healthcare outages, absenteeism, presenteeism, low performance, loss of productivity. 300 billion globally. Gallup just released their 2026 study about the workplace. $10 trillion. Now that says with a T, is lost to the global economy due to employee disengagement. We saw in 2025 the significant declines in employee engagement, including leaders and managers, the lowest since the start of the pandemic. So a lot of research was blaming the pandemic on things. Okay, we are post the pandemic. It is dropping, and it still dropped. $10 trillion. That is almost 10% of the global GDP.
From employee disengagement.
Yes.
So they're not as revenue generating, obviously, because they're not as engaged. They're not, literally like not there, whether it be physically or mentally, they are just not, they're not there. That's like, cutting your workforce by 10% in some ways as well. Like how would that affect your business? I mean, that's something that we definitely have to pay attention to. And I'll be honest, I'm like hearing this, I'm like, that is a big problem. And for the person listening, and they're one person, probably part of a team as well. How can they get more curious with their team? Just in terms of like what ultimately with the outcome of making some of these cultural shifts in their business. I love that you mentioned like really starting with curiosity, because you don't know what you don't know. And to your point, so many of us may even project what we think we know onto other people because we don't ask and we don't get curious. I think that's brilliant as a starting point. What comes after that?
So one of the things I often say is about building psychologically honoring spaces, not safety, as I said to you, because again, safety is subjective and so is bravery. What me as a junior employee may not feel as comfortable speaking up in a meeting, as I gave you the example of working that healthcare system, as compared to now. Now I'm just like, I'm gonna say it, but I think that it's also leaning into being consistent. If people can trust that you're going to be consistent, I'm going to be equitable and fair to myself and to others, then they know that you are going to help create a space that is safe for yourself and others. If you follow through, do what you say. People are going to do what you do, not what you say. It's the thing that people tell parents all the time. You can't tell your kid don't smoke, but you're smoking. They're going to do what they see you doing.
Yeah.
More so than what you say to do or not to do. Because as humans, we are creatures of habit. We are wired for community and we mirror each other. That's science. You can argue with the science teacher. Don't argue with me. That is biology and science. It's about repairing. And repair does require humility. It requires acknowledgement. It requires accountability. And so it is learning how to regulate yourself too as a leader is really important. And when I say regulate, I do not mean suppress your emotions and your feelings. I mean, regulate yourself in a system so the system that you created also recognizes your humanity and you make sure other people recognize that of yours and others. We have to be able to be uncomfortable. The one thing I know everything about is that I don't know everything. And I wish we were in spaces where we were more comfortable leaning into that. Adult learning theory 101 is adults don't like to present as not knowing, right? You have the Dunning-Kruger effect where people think they know more, all of these different things. But the person that asks the most questions is the person that is the most wise. The person that listens for that response, engages things that are beyond their own comfort and their experience, is the person that learns the most. They're also probably a person that's been uncomfortable, but eventually get comfortable with being uncomfortable. So it becomes second nature. Are there things in areas and growth areas I still have? Absolutely. We're human. Gosh knows they are. But when I think about how we do this in a system, and again, I told you I'm very much of an academic and I bring in so much of the research. Why this is so critical is because 70% of workers globally say that their managers impact their mental health more than their spouse or their therapist. I'm trained in mental health. I don't do direct practice anymore, but the manager, which is connected to your workplace culture, 70%, they studied 10 countries. That's a pretty good amount of information, right? And that same study showed us, I believe it was like 70% of employees also said that work impacted their lives at home and their relationships. You're bringing it home. People compartmentalize, separate. No, we don't separate. You take your brain with you.
Yeah.
It's not like a switch. Oh, I'm going to turn off the work switch. 65% said it impacted their well-being. 70% of employees said that they wish their managers and their companies would do more to support their mental health and the culture of the organization. These are not things that we can ignore. Organizational culture, leadership, how we show up, trust, integrity, consistency, all of that connects to your profitability.
Yeah. That is so powerful, and no pressure, leaders of the world. But I think this is so important because, again, what you said, we don't know what we don't know. I mean, in some ways, I know we look at this from the vantage point of the negative impact, but what an opportunity as well to make a positive impact in your team's lives too. That, just to kind of like flip the script and the work that you're doing, that, work is not going to be, like you had mentioned at the very beginning, work is not going to be all sunshine and rainbows. It doesn't mean that we still don't need to be resilient. There will still be hard days, but we all want to feel like that we don't have to fear our managers, for example, because of those hard days, that if anything, they have our back, so to speak. And there is that level of support. I remember, and I have gone through my, hard lessons just in terms of workplace culture. Working, especially in public relations, is voted as a top 10 stressful occupation in the United States. And a lot of that is because of the nature of the job, like working with media. They have deadlines, and deadlines are, expiration dates for opportunities. So there's a lot of pressure. But there's a lot of pressure too from clients, anybody that has a client, especially when there's pressure on the client from media and then pressure back on you from the client. And I remember I had a client that was, very lovely, but they were just not it. They were really causing me and my team to spiral. And, what we often talk about is like time is non-renewable. And especially like time is also flexible, in that like 60 minutes when you're happy at work is going to take you way farther than 60 minutes when you're like scared to open your email and are basically paralyzed because of the work. And I was seeing that shift start to happen, where it was like, oh my God, like our productivity is sinking and I'm going to start to lose team if I don't do something. And ultimately I had to fire the client. And that was really hard for me as a business owner, because we're sometimes in this rock and a hard place where you're like, okay, I need to pay you people, but I also don't want to lose you because of, the pressures from the clients, media, whoever, in other people's cases, patients, partners, referring agents, whatever that might look like. So for someone who does want to lead well, but they're managing their own stress and their responsibilities, how can they stay grounded and aligned in their leadership so that they don't lose sight of this North Star?
I think what you just said is it. Being willing to be between this rock and this hard place, because when I thought about, what you reflected, the thing that came to me was, oh wow, her team would have really felt valued and seen because she fired that client, because you were willing to risk it all and show them that they are valuable to you. That is powerful. And the step before that was you had to wrestle with your own humanity and your own needs. So the answer is leaders have to remember that they're human too. Everyone is human. Everyone is a leader, right? I always joke and say the 2-year-old is a leader, because there's a 2-year-old that strips in Target. Everybody's running around trying to catch a 2-year-old because they're running with their diaper in their hand. They're leading you to do what they want you to do. But ultimately, you have to remember your own humanity. You cannot honor the humanity of another person if you cannot honor it in yourself. You cannot honor the needs of another person if you cannot recognize that you also have needs. Leadership is a verb, not a noun. And we are leaders in all spaces, not just in work. The person who is running their household is leading that household. The person who is leading the bird watching team in Central Park is a leader. Everyone is a leader. We often, especially in the Western context, put leadership specifically connected to workplace, because we've tied our identity to workplace. And that is problematic, because if your identity is tied to what you do, you never become. What we do shifts. How many titles have you had in your life? Babysitter.
Yeah.
Like all of the things, right? Sister, friend, partner. We have many titles in different seasons in our life. Our titles shift. The core of who you are cannot be connected to your title, because your title is like the ocean. It's constantly moving. But who you are should be a rock. In order for that rock to stay, it has to be on a steady foundation. You as a leader need support too. You need accountability too. We have to acknowledge, LinkedIn did a study of 2 years ago, and it showed that over 40% of people said that their workplace title shifted their identity and impacted their self-esteem, whether they got a promotion or a demotion. That's sad. Identity be so wrapped up. When I first came to America, I was a tween. I'm an immigrant. And as I got older and people would say, what do you do? And I didn't understand how to answer the question because I would go, oh, like on the weekends, like after, like I was, I'm an avid reader. I'm like, oh, I love it. They meant work.
Yes.
And I didn't understand that for a long time. I was like, well, yeah, that's part of my day, but like, oh my gosh, I'm going reading. I love walking. I love the beach. I'm going to walk from Manhattan to Brooklyn because it's a nice day outside. Wait, those were so important to me, but it was connected to work. And then when you go to spaces and it's like, well, where do you work? It's like, well, I own my own strategic firm. Oh, okay. Then people don't know where to place you.
Yeah.
But I'm also a woman of faith. I'm also one of a twin. I'm also a friend. I'm also part of different groups. But I'm also just me. Mm-hmm. So many leaders, especially women, especially caregivers and people that are in mission-driven spaces are conditioned to overfunction because our worth has been tied to our productivity. Mm-hmm. I need us to have sustainable leadership, which means that we stay grounded by boundaries. Boundaries are our friends, limits and boundaries. Being able to rest, it's not a reward, it's a requirement. Mm-hmm. Staying connected to your humanity outside of your title, because your primary title is human. Mm-hmm. So if your title is connected to your identity, I need you to understand it shouldn't consume it. Mm-hmm. You are so much more. You are a gift to the world. The person you are, the space and time that you were born, the time you entered the universe is a gift. You are the world to someone else, not to your workplace. We have seen the people leave or pass away and they're replaced the same day. Mm-hmm. You are irreplaceable to the people that love and care for you. Your brilliance, your gifting, your presence, the way that you view things, how you deconstruct the book that is different from the way I deconstruct the book. And that is beautiful. And it is such a beautiful reflection of the vastness of humanity. I want you to embrace that because you are a gift. And if this gift is not well, then the present of your presence will be missed.
Dr. Claire, you are a gift as well, too. This has been, such an amazing conversation. And you had mentioned your strategic firm. I know we haven't talked that much about it, but this is something that you've shared with us in the last 45 minutes, but people can work with you directly on this. Like if there's someone that owns a business, is in a place of leadership, is in HR, whatever, they can come to you and really make not just an effort, but create a completely different outcome for their businesses with your Dr. Claire Speaks work. Can you tell us where we can find you online, get in touch with you, get a snapshot of just some of the different ways to hear your message more thoughtfully after this podcast episode is up?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So you can look for me on LinkedIn, Dr. Claire Green-Forde on LinkedIn. My website is drclairespeaks.com. And you can Google is our friend. Yeah. I partner with organizations and specifically senior leaders within organizations. So your HR, your C-suite, your development teams, through keynotes and leadership workshops and strategic advisement, specifically focused on the intersection of leadership, organizational culture, and well-being, because I want to address the root cause of burnout and high turnover and stalled culture, and the things that are lowering your profitability. And so I think that, this work is broad, but it is so necessary. And I welcome partnering with people. I find people will bring me in for a keynote or a workshop, and then they're like, oh yeah, we probably have this problem. We didn't really want to recognize that we have this problem. But I love training. I love speaking. I love connecting with people. And I love helping organizations and teams because I firmly believe that we can do this better. Because we have the innately wired in us is our humanity. If we leaned into that more, my goodness, how profitable and amazing we can be. So please reach out. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. We'll have those links in the show notes. I know more profitable. I'm just thinking that there's got to be $10 trillion in the sofa seat cushion that we can dig up together. Let's dig up 1% of that. That's great.
There is definitely money we can dig up in the social cushion, but also the impact. Because it was really about people, right?
Absolutely.
This is really about our well-being. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Claire Green-Forde. Thank you for joining us on Grow Your Wealth. Thank you so much for listening. I hope this episode deposited some useful advice and insights to help you grow your wealth. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future conversations. You can find more resources, episode details, and updates at growyourwealthpodcast.com. And let's keep the conversation going on Instagram. Follow me at Grow Your Wealth Podcast. I'd love to hear your thoughts, questions, or takeaway from today's show. Until next time, remember, burnout is optional. Take care, and I'll see you next week.